Let's talk about committing your tracks. All right, so what is the commit function? Why would you do it? When would you do it? Um, what do you want to think about while you're doing it or before you're doing it? Um, First, okay, maybe before we get into what is it, why would you do it? So I want you to think about your transferring your session to the other studio from the lab, or you are sending it off to be mixed at a professional studio, or you're getting a lot of error messages saying, hey, your CPU can't keep up. Committing your tracks would help in all of those situations. Now let's talk about what it is. So in Pro Tools, I'm going to look at this sub bass track. I started this earlier and it caused problems, and I'll explain. Maybe I'll show you that at some point. So I have this bass track, and I want to commit it. Committing it means you are going to essentially take this MIDI data and convert it into an audio track. So the way that you do that is I have the selected track. I'm going to right click or hit Control and click on the nameplate, and I am going to go to commit. There's a couple things that you can think about when you're doing this. So it can be many selected tracks. You can do them all at once. Do you want to consolidate the clips? So essentially all of these individual clips will be made into one track if you consolidate. If not, they'll remain individual clips of audio though. Do you want to render the automation? So if I have volume automation on this track or panning information, do I want automation? Do I want to burn that into the audio? Personally, if I'm going to send this off to be mixed, I don't want to commit those mix decisions. I kind of like to think about that and rewrite them into my track, which I think they stay in anyways, but this is about rendering it into the audio. Do you want to copy the sends? So if I'm looking at my mix window, for example, hey, that's really small. Do I want my sub bass track to end up with this bus 1 send on it already set up? And that I might want, you know, again, if I'm thinking about mixing, I may not. I may want to start from scratch, but you know, that's not a huge deal. Let's get back to this commit window, because you can always reroute. These are not commitments. Rendering, that's a commitment. And group assignments. Do I want to maintain any groups that I've created for editing purposes or mixing purposes? And what do I want to happen? Where do I want it to go? Do I want it to be inserted after the last track or the selected track? The source track. What do I want to do with the source track? This is pretty important. So this is the source. Do I want to do nothing and just leave it there in the session? Do I want to make it inactive, which would mean, you know, it's still in the session, but it's grayed out? Do I want to delete it? That would be a commitment that I don't want to make. Or do I want to hide it and make it inactive, which would mean inactivating it and then removing it, not removing it, but hiding it in your tracks list, which just means pressing on one of these buttons and making it disappear. That's generally my favorite option, because making it inactive does take it off of the processor, and it's hidden, it's out of your way. So here I'm going to go ahead and commit this sub bass track. And there it is. This is my sub bass. Now it has a CM on it because it is a committed track. And then you can see over here the sub bass track is hidden. I'll just bring it back, and it's inactivated. So, you know, you go through all this process. You're like, you know what? I want to go back to the MIDI and change something. You just need to reactivate this track, and it's back to normal, and you're back to using Massive. Again, one of the main reasons that we would commit our tracks is that, you know, what if the studio that you want to mix this in doesn't have massive? What if, for example, at school here, I know for a fact, because I haven't done it, the version of Contact in the studio is outdated and you can't run the same MIDI data or the MIDI tracks. The last thing I want to think about is, let's see, a reminder here. So when you're transferring your session, and it does free up resources, these instrument tracks tend to take more processing power than audio tracks do. So that's good. Always good to free up tracks. And this is not, you're not going to do this when you're still creating. This is really, I'm kind of done with the music. Again, you can still come back and reactivate a track, but do I want to remove effects before I commit my track? So that's another thing, that if you have been mixing in the box here, let's take a look at this track. It looks like it has some effects on it. So I have this massive track that I added this delay on it. If I commit this track, I'm going to also highlight this, including the silence at the beginning, and I'll talk about that in a second. Do I want to commit to this delay? Because if I commit this track, it is going to have that delay burnt into it. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And generally when I'm mixing, I like to start fresh. I want to add my delays. I want to know that that is what is coming together and what's happening. So I personally would probably remove those, that delay, because I don't want to be stuck with that decision. I'd like to use other plugins. I'd like to change up the delay. I don't want that burnt into my audio. But sometimes maybe you do, and it's just part of the aesthetic of the track that you've made. All right, so basically that's committing. You want to commit all your tracks, and again, you can do multiple tracks at once just by hitting commit and the selected tracks. Boom. Let's see that I'm right and this works. It does take some time. There you go. All right, so what your end product is a bunch of audio tracks.